Welcome to Biblically Grounded, your podcast about Bible archaeology. Everything archaeological and biblical we're going to talk about. I'm your host, Clayton Van Huss, and I am joined today in the studio by a very special guest. I am joined by my wife, Abigail Van Huss, who is the archaeologist who I aspire to be. Everyone wants to be like Abigail. You may have read some of her work before. Up until 3 months ago, she was Abigail Leavitt, but we were married during our dig at Biblical Shiloh. And that was pretty exciting, wasn't it?
It was,
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe that was the first wedding at Shiloh, at ancient Shiloh, since, I don't know, a couple of thousand years maybe.
It's quite possible.
It is. Of course, we read in the Bible, in the book of Judges, about a very interesting group of weddings that took place there as the Benjamites came in and took the women who were dancing.
They needed wives. They came and took them.
That's right. Now, that sounds like a very strange thing, but of course, the women who were dancing at Shiloh were dancing to find husbands. They just weren't expecting them to be Benjamites. So there we go. So interestingly, Abigail, you have been involved in archaeology for a number of years now. And I know we've talked before, but let's, for anyone who's new to the podcast, and that's probably a lot of people. The podcast is still...
It's pretty new.
Pretty new, that's right. So let's talk a little bit about you. What we're going to talk about today is what it takes to be a biblical archaeologist, and we're going to talk specifically about Abigail's journey into archaeology. So, Abigail, you are well known and respected amongst biblical archaeologists. I'm at the Near East Archaeological Society conference last year. Abigail left the room after speaking, and the next archaeologist who got up told everyone in the room, "You watch her. She's the next big thing in biblical archaeology." And so, so we're going to talk to her today. Abigail, when did you get involved in biblical archaeology?
Well, my first archaeology project wasn't actually a dig. It was the Temple Mount sifting project. So when there was some construction work done on the Temple Mount, there were truckloads of dirt taken out kind of illegally, and some Israeli archaeologists found that dirt, and so they sifted through it to find anything that they could. This is from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the holiest site maybe in the world. And so I got to be involved in that, and that was just amazing. And so I knew I wanted to go on a dig after that. And so I started digging with ABR in 2010 was my first real dig season.
Now, I want to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
Who is ABR?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Tell us. This is interesting.
That's Associates for Biblical Research. It's a Christian organization that focuses on archaeology and showing the reliability of the Bible through biblical archaeology. And so they've done digs for decades in Israel. And when I joined, they were digging at a site called Khirbet El Makader. And since then, the dig has finished and closed down. And so now the team is working at Shiloh. And of course, you and I are both part of that project.
Yes, and indeed. And you mentioned the Temple Mount sifting project. I think a lot of our listeners who have been to the land of Israel, been to the land of the Bible, they maybe took part in that because you were a tourist, you were on a tour, correct?
Yeah, so what they do is they let tour groups come, and you can come just like as part of a tour, so for maybe an hour or two and sift. And I did that, that was in 2007, and I told my group leader, I was like, you leave me here, and I'll be happy. And he was like, no, you have to stay with the group. And so in 2008, I went back and for 2 weeks just worked at the Temple Mount sifting project.
Interestingly, the Temple Mount sifting project was also my introduction to biblical archaeology. I went to Israel on a tour, and we did the Temple Mount sifting project. Now, we sifted material from the Way of Ascent, from the road that goes up from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount, because they're doing that too. And I remember one of our guys found a coin, but those little bits of glass and bone and metal, like what is this little piece of metal, and just all of these things. And I understand just wanting to stay and keep on doing that. And that's how the Lord led me into archaeology. I think that's interesting that we have that similar beginning, and probably a number of our listeners have been involved in the Temple Mount sifting project. So you did the Temple Mount sifting project, and then you went back the next year and you said 2 weeks?
2 weeks just working at the Temple Mount sifting project. At that point, ABR wasn't able to dig because of unrest in the area of their site, and so they actually took a group just to do the Temple Mount sifting project since they couldn't dig that year, and so I got in on that.
Oh, that is really cool. That is so neat. So after doing the sifting project, and sifting, you're not down with a trowel. And the sifting project works in that you have a screen, and they have buckets of material that have water in them, and you dump them into the screen, and then you spray it down with water, and you got all these bits of rock and things like that. And you're going through looking for little bits and pieces, kind of like a little treasure hunt, and you're moving little rocks around. And so that is a process that's involved in at least our excavations at Shiloh. But it's a technology. It's ancient technology. You're washing things with water, but not all sites are doing it. But what happens is, first, you have to get the material out of the ground. You have to go through, and it's gone through several steps before then. So how did you go from sifting project into actual excavation work?
Well, it was a whole new thing because I had never, done that. And so I came to the site, to Kirbet El Makader, and we just had to dig into the ground. And I didn't know what I was looking for, because even the finds are different. When you're at the sifting project, you're looking for tiny, like you said, tiny little bits of glass, tiny little coins. But at the site, we're looking for big potsherds and things like sling stones and larger artifacts. And so I had to retrain my eye and figure out, what am I looking for? And but you catch on pretty quick. It's not that hard to learn. And so you're digging, you're finding things, and of course you show your supervisor everything that looks interesting, and he says, it's just a rock. This happens a lot, but you learn and you develop that eye, and so it's just a whole different thing, but so much fun.
Yes, and I have an interesting story about a supervisor rejecting my finds. My first dig at Shiloh, my supervisor was none other than Abigail. And I kept finding these little round pieces of pottery. And somebody had obviously made these pieces round for some reason. And I'd had enough archaeology classes by that time that my understanding, I saw these and I thought, these must be jar stoppers. You have a jar or a jug, a ceramic jug, and it has a hole in the top, and you've got stuff in there you want to keep safe from bugs. So you take a piece of cloth, put it over the top, and you take this round piece of pottery that you've made and you push it in, and it holds that cloth in place and bugs don't get in. So this is what I thought I was finding. And I kept saying, oh, look, is this a jar stopper? And she would look and say, no. I don't know how many jar stoppers that I found that she rejected. And finally she was like, if that's a jar stopper, that's the ugliest one I've ever seen. And I'm trying to impress this girl. Like I am digging and trying to impress her. And I end up coming home, and in school I'm studying, I'm working on pottery, and I'm doing a project on the secondary usage of pottery. When pots break, you do something with the pieces, right? And so I finally found images that looked like what I was finding. And I found an article that somebody had written on what it was. And what I was finding, they were not jar stoppers. They were pieces of 2,000-year-old toilet paper.
And see, but you learned something that even I didn't know at that point. I didn't know what they were. So
that's right. And so, our love story is one of me impressing her with ancient toilet paper. so that's part of archaeology. So okay, so you're excavating now. You're getting your hands in the dirt, and you are moving. You are working, and Abigail, just so our listeners understand, you are the assistant director of the ABR dig at Shiloh. You have worked your way up. How did you go from being this young girl who's going out there and finding potsherds and stones and bits of glass to being the person who walks around and checks on everybody's work and takes up all the artifacts and records them and all the things you do to help run the dig? How did you do that?
Well, first of all, I did it in the way that is backwards of how you're supposed to do it. Because you're supposed to go to school and get an education and then go out and get experience. And I did it the other way around. But I showed up and I kept coming back to the dig and I wanted to be helpful. And so we had an older lady who's our objects registrar, and I offered to help her. And so she taught me how to do it. And when she decided that she didn't want to come anymore, she was getting old, and I became the objects registrar. And when I was in the field and my square supervisor was swamped with paperwork, I offered to help. And so he trained me and he showed me how to do the paperwork. And then when one year one of our supervisors couldn't come, I became a supervisor. And so I got experience in the field. I learned, I studied, just kind of trying to help out where I could. And so I kind of worked my way up a little bit. And then by the time, these last couple of years at Shiloh, I'm the assistant director now. So it's a fun role. I get to see everything that's going on at the site. And the not fun part about it is I don't get to play in the dirt anymore. So that's a little sad. But it is fun to be able to see not just be stuck in one little hole in the ground, but be able to see what's going on site-wide.
So Abigail, you mentioned that you did this backwards, that you went out in the field and began to excavate, and then you began to study. So some of our listeners who may be interested in becoming an archaeologist, they're wondering, how do I do that? You've already told us that you started off going and participating. And so you can volunteer at a dig. And how many digs have you been involved? You don't just dig with Associates for Biblical Research. You dig with different universities and different groups in Israel.
I tried to count it up, and I think I've worked at about 10 sites.
Okay.
Give or take.
Yeah, she's an expert. She's been digging in all of these sites all over and finding all kinds of cool stuff. So you can get involved, and you can go to digshiloh.org if you want to volunteer to dig with us. If you want Abigail to be your boss, so there you go. You can come dig with us at ancient Shiloh, where the Tabernacle was, the Ark of the Covenant for over 300 years. This was the capital of Israel from the time of the Judges up until, say, the time of Samuel, when it was apparently destroyed. So come dig with us. There's our commercial for that.
Well, and I would recommend if somebody wants to get involved with archaeology, maybe wants to study archaeology, do volunteer and dig for a season. Make sure you like it before you spend a lot of years getting an education.
That's true.
I know some people who came on a dig after finishing their bachelor's degree or even a master's degree, and they realized that they hated it. So do come dig. Make sure you like it.
Yeah, it is hard work, but it's also you work hard and you play hard. And say at the Shiloh dig, it gets hot. Israel gets hot, and we try to dig at the time of year before it gets too hot. We dig in May and June, but we are getting up sometime before 4 because breakfast is at 4 in the morning. So about 3:45 is usually when I set my alarm, and I get up, go to breakfast, eat that, and then we are on the bus and pulling out down the road before 5 o'clock. And so we get to the site as the sun's coming up. It's a beautiful view. Anyone who's ever excavated at Shiloh has come home with pictures of that sunrise coming up. Same sunrise that Samuel and Hannah and Eli and people like that would have seen at Shiloh. It is beautiful. And so we get there and we work. And then we have an early lunch. Was it about 10:30, I think?
10:30 lunch, yep.
10:30, and we eat good. We do eat well.
We do.
We have running water on the site, which is really cool. Outhouses. So, I mean, like, this is like luxury. And so after lunch, we'll work again until about 1 o'clock. And then the heat has really kicked in. And you've drunk a lot of water. You've taken your electrolytes. And then we clean up for the day, get our photographs, get our aerial photos, and we go down, we wash those 2,000 potsherds that we dug up that day. We wash them and we set them out to dry to be read the next day. And it's hard work. But you also get to experience the land of the Bible. So biblical archaeology is something. So there's our little like vacation commercial there. So you have been excavating, and now you realize you're going to be an archaeologist. And so you need the education. So how does that work?
Well, for me, I had never gone to college. I graduated high school, started working, and then for quite a few years, I was just saving my money to go on digs. It was great fun. And so I had to go back to the beginning. I had to get a bachelor's degree. And I discovered that in the US, it's pretty hard to get a bachelor's degree in ancient Near Eastern archaeology. They don't really offer that. So I started a bachelor's degree in history, got a couple years into that, and then I was able to transfer to the Bible seminary in Katy, Texas, where they do a dual degree completion. So I was able to finish my bachelor's while doing my master's degree. Got a master's degree in biblical history and archaeology. And then now I'm working on my PhD. I'm at Ariel University in Israel. And so I lived in Israel for a couple of years working on that. Now I'm working on writing my dissertation. And so hoping to finish that up within the next year or so. And so, yeah, I've just kind of gone the whole way, starting from the beginning and digging the whole time while I was at it. So working on that experience too.
So when you're working on a bachelor's degree, that's very general things. So you're learning general stuff. The master's degree, you begin to become more focused. In fact, we've got your book here, the Elbernot Structures Joshua's Altar, which you can find at swrc.com. So this book was actually the culmination of your master's degree in biblical history and archaeology.
Right. That was the topic of my master's degree. And so I wrote my master's thesis, and then eventually we got that turned into a book. And so I was able to focus more in my master's degree. Since I was at a seminary, I still had to take, the basic seminary courses, of course. But now that I'm working on my PhD, now it's very focused in on my very specific topic that I'm studying. And it's really fun because I get to just study what I want to study. Don't have to do a bunch of other courses that are kind of irrelevant. It's all super focused.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your PhD program. So you are studying at a university in the land of Israel. And you, through that, you've been able to be involved in various digs. You've been able to visit, I don't even know if you know how many sites.
So many sites.
And this summer, we got to visit some of those together.
We did.
That was exciting.
That was fun exploring.
Yes, and sometimes you wonder when you're in the hills and you're going back into some of these places, and some of the local folks aren't sure they want you there. And it doesn't matter which side of the conflict they're on. They could be armed, and they may be wondering why you're near their house. And yes, I think
so we tried to be careful and avoid areas that were tricky.
Right, you want to go where you're not trespassing. So we're looking at sites. We got to look at some really cool Bronze Age shaft tombs cut into the rock from. They were early bronze, right? From before the time of Abraham.
Right. Yeah.
So these
very
old
early
Canaanite tombs. We were able to look at a lot of sites. So you're focused. So when you come into your PhD, you're really focusing down. Do you mind to tell us what you're working on?
So my topic is the transition from the late Bronze Age to the early Iron Age in the central hill country of Israel. So Israel, we know, is this long strip of a country, and it goes from the sea up to the mountains and then down to the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea, which is below sea level, quite low. So I'm looking at that central ridge the highlands of Israel, and I'm looking at a specific time period that's basically the transition from where it's a Canaanite culture to where it's an Israelite culture. So we have, of course, biblically we know about the Exodus, and the Israelites come from Egypt and they come into the land. And so I'm looking at the material culture that kind of surrounds that transition and trying to figure out archaeologically how this plays out. And again, with biblical archaeology, we're looking at the Bible, we're looking at archaeology, and we're letting them kind of speak to each other. We might learn something archaeologically that's beyond what the Bible says. We might learn something from the Bible and say, oh, this makes sense in the dirt, like what we found, because we have this text that talks about it. And so I think they play together very nicely. But as far as my PhD is concerned, I'm looking at it from a very archaeological standpoint and looking at what do these sites, what do these remains in the ground, what do they tell us about what happened at that time period?
Yeah, that is fascinating stuff. And getting to go out with you on the week. Now, here's the thing. During the dig, our excavators are going to visit the sites, right? They're going to Jericho. They're going to Caesarea Maritima. They're going to Megiddo. They're going to all these really cool sites. And we're out here in Abigail's car, crammed in, 4 of us getting in there and driving around to these middle of nowhere sites.
Sites that don't even have a name.
Right. It's like, okay, and that's the thing. So many sites are listed in the Bible. Mm-hmm. So many cities and towns and things that they have these names, but nobody knows where they are. We can tell what the general vicinity usually based on different clues, but you go to these sites and the sites that Abigail needed to visit for her work, these are sites that like you just go to a hill in the middle of nowhere and there's some trees and some bushes and a lot of rocks, and you just walk around on these hillsides and you're looking for pieces of pottery. And the cool thing about pottery is pottery helps you to date. The pottery forms change over the years. So you're going, okay, this is bronze, this is late bronze, this is iron 1, iron 2, all these technical terms, but just talking about the dates. And so we're walking through these sites and we're just looking for little pieces of pottery. And of course, it's Israel. It's an ancient place. There's pottery like everywhere. And so we're going up these hillsides and we're finding things and finding tombs in the cave. Of course, there's nothing in them anymore because they've been looted over the years. But you're finding these sites. We're saying, okay, this must be the site that somebody wrote about back in 1935 and said was here. So here it is. And could this be this Israelite site, or is this Canaanite site? And that is exciting stuff. So how many of those sites have you been looking at working on this PhD program?
So in my list of sites for my studies, I think I have somewhere in the vicinity of 270 sites. I have not visited all of them, but those are sites that somebody has been to. Somebody found them and somebody published a report that this is what I found, and I found pottery from this period. So most of those sites haven't even been excavated. Some of them have been, but at least they've been surveyed, and so they can give me a little bit of data that helps me to understand and answer my research questions and what I want to learn for my PhD.
So you're not just being an adventurer. Now, it sounds like a lot of fun, and it is. And how many times would we go to a site and maybe we'd look down the hill and you'd see an IDF Humvee or whatever parked next to your car, a couple of soldiers standing there watching us coming down the hill.
They did not understand why we were there.
It's adventure. It is adventure for sure. But there's important work being done. We're not just going out and having fun. What are you doing when you're at these sites? What are you trying to find? And how is that going to contribute to the work you will publish?
So when I wanted to visit these sites, these are sites I've read about. Like I've seen the published report, at least of what was found, which sometimes is minimal. But what I want to do is I want to understand the site better. Like I want to personally see it so I can understand, oh, this is what they wrote about. Yeah, I get it. And then also I want to kind of double check. And like they said they found pottery from this period. So I'm going to look on the ground and like see if I see sherds from that period. And I want to see like if they said that they saw ruins. I want to see if there's anything that I can learn that maybe they missed. I want to confirm that what they reported is accurate, which they did a good job. But again, it helps to know personally, like to have seen it myself. And so as I'm confirming this and I'm seeing the sites and I'm learning to understand them better. And a lot of times you read about a site and you don't really understand the situation, but you get there and you're like, this is on the top of the hill. There's a great view. I can see the ancient trade route from here. And you understand that site better. You understand, okay, that's why they put it here. And so it's really helpful.
Yeah, and biblical geography is a completely, I won't say different subject, but it's a subject that is huge in and of its own. And so many Western Christians who've never been to Israel, or even if you have, it's still biblical geography may be a thing that you don't really think about much. But when you're there and you're seeing the trade routes, you're seeing the hilltop fortresses, or you're seeing the small settlements, you begin to realize that the Bible really is a local book. I mean, it deals with the greatest cosmic ideas. It deals with the salvation of mankind, the creation of mankind, the future of mankind. And yet it is so local in its writing that it's amazing. So, Abigail, we've talked a little bit about what you're studying. We've talked about where you're studying, your journey to becoming a biblical archaeologist. And it's a great story, but it's not over. There's a future for you. As you work to finish up your PhD, you're going to be collecting all this data, putting together all of these ideas, these thoughts. And the cool thing about archaeology, well, any science really, but especially the soft sciences like the historical sciences, there's a lot of interpretation that goes on. So you're collecting the data and you're helping to interpret, but you're also putting the raw data out there in your writing so that other archaeologists can look at it and can study it and to come up with conclusions. So as you get closer to completion of this program, what are you looking for in the future? Where is Abigail going to go? And how is she going to contribute to modern biblical scholarship?
Well, I've been taking things kind of one step at a time and, doing one degree at a time. And then, so people are already asking me, especially in the academic circles, so what's next, a postdoc? And I'm like, no, I think a PhD is good enough for me. Don't think I need to do a postdoc. But no, I really do hope that the work that I do and the dissertation that I write will be a source book for other scholars to be able to find the raw data, to be able to work from that and come to conclusions and springboard off of that. And I do want to keep writing. And I would love to both write academic archaeological publications. Of course, I want to keep digging. I want to be part of finding new things and publishing those and putting those out there. And I'd love to write for also just a more general audience of people who maybe don't know all the scientific archaeological terms, but really want to know about these topics.
Yeah.
And so I would love to write kind of both types, and we'll see where it goes. I'm taking things one step at a time, but yeah, I would love to keep writing.
Yeah, so you want to write both for the scholar and the layperson. And of course, most of our listening audience have never been able to study archaeology. This is something that fascinates them. And as believers, they want to see the things that correlate with the scriptures. They want to see where the Bible talks about a thing. They want to be able to understand it better. So you want to appeal to that audience as well. So as you move in that direction, what sorts of encouragement would you give to the believer who has heard over and over, the Bible can't be trusted, the Bible's not true, it was just written by a bunch of men in the Bronze Age, it's you can't trust what you see there, it was written years later, all this sort of thing. What would you say to that believer who's looking for a place to start studying, who's looking for a place to learn, who's looking for an answer, an argument, if you will, an apologetic, on where to start with the historicity and the culture of the Bible?
Well, fortunately, there are already a lot of good sources out there, and you're right. There's a lot of literature, and it's almost the people who don't believe the Bible are kind of pushing an agenda, and they'll try to get it out there that the Bible can't be trusted, that archaeology maybe disproves the Bible. But the thing that's happening is that as there's more and more things being found, we're finding more and more things that actually match up with the Bible. So arguments that they used to use, like they used to say that King David never existed, and now we have evidence that King David did indeed exist. His name is written on an ancient inscription. And so, yes, these finds are out there, more and more coming to light. In my view, archaeology matches very well with the Bible. It illuminates the scriptures. And yeah, there are a lot of good sources out there, and more being written. There's up and coming archaeologists who are working and going to be publishing their findings. And so I think that there are a lot of good sources where people can read about this stuff and learn and equip themselves to defend their faith if they need to. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. It is encouraging to look out there and to see my fellow students who are working hard, who love the Lord, who are publishing in peer-reviewed journals, who are writing reports, who are writing for popular journals. This stuff's important too. Getting the information out to the everyday believer. We need this information, and it's out there. There are resources, of course, biblically grounded as part of Southwest Radio Ministries, and we have Affirm apologetics. And so we're trying to provide all the resources that we can. But there are many others. We've talked about Associates for Biblical Research, with whom we dig. There are so many people out there who are getting out the news of what's being found, and it's amazing. It's something to see the Bible come alive. I've believed since I was a child, and I've gone through my years. I've gone through learning and maturing and doubts. We all have doubts, and when the unbeliever, especially a scholar or someone who seems smarter than us, comes along and tells us, yeah, that's just not real, that can be quite discouraging. But here's what I've learned when I get faced with something that discourages me: tackle it head on. Go and look at it. Look into the veracity of the claim. Look into what's being said. And every time that I have gone in and looked at that claim, it has turned out to be some off-the-wall theory. It has turned out to be some complete misunderstanding of the text or of the material culture, or some sort of false worship. That's one of the things, that one of the accusations that's leveled against the Bible is that, we learn about these Israelites who worshiped this God Yahweh, but we see them worshiping all these other gods. Well, that's the story the Bible tells us. In material culture, we can expect to find Israel worshiping Baal, worshiping Ashtoreth, worshiping Asherah, and some of these other deities from their neighbors. The Bible says they were constantly doing that. That's why they were. That's why they fell, the kingdoms of Israel and Judah, because they were going after other gods. And so, this discourages a lot of believers when they hear, "Oh, they were worshiping other gods." Well, go and read your Bible. That's exactly what it says. And so, what's cool is what we find in the ground is what we find in the text. It's amazing. So, Abigail, thank you so much. Abigail Van Huss has been our guest today. She is the bright shining star, the upcoming. Okay, I won't embarrass her too much, but she really is working hard. She's out there producing all sorts of valuable information for the believer to look at, and we thank you. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Great. So I'm your host, Clayton Van Huss. Thank you once again for listening to Biblically Grounded.